Hello and welcome back to the Not Your Neurotypical Fitness podcast. And I've got another amazing guest on, which I am selfishly quite excited once again for this topic because I think there's going to be loads that I can learn from it based on what this amazing lady specializes in. So I know that a lot of you guys are going to take loads of value from this. And once again, we haven't got someone exclusively in the health and wellness space. I will let Lauren explain what she does herself without me kind of like downplaying it or getting it wrong. But the topics and things that she supports people with, there is so much crossover and overlap into the world of health and fitness and the things that I support my clients on from like a mindset perspective. So I know that what we learn from her today and the things that we can take from this are going to be applicable to so many elements of your life to better your overall well-being, which is going to be amazing. So as I didn't want to butcher it, Lauren, are you okay to do a short introduction to yourself and ultimately the work that you do with people?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So I'm Lauren Smy. I'm 44. I live just outside London in Epping in Essex.
Yeah.
And I live there with my husband and my 12-year-old twins, and we're a very neurodivergent household. So I've got ADHD myself. Both my boys have got ADHD. One's also autistic, and we think probably my husband's autistic. He's not got the diagnosis, but so we're living in a bit of a chaotic, but definitely fun and exciting household. And so, a lot of what kind of I've learned about ADHD personally has then shaped what I now do professionally, which is working as an ADHD coach. So I work with individuals, particularly high achievers with ADHD, also other neurodiversities as well. I work with autistic and dyslexic because there's often a lot of crossover.
Oh,
My
sure.
main specialism is ADHD, but yeah, all sort of neurodiverse people. And I'm also like a neurodiversity workplace consultant. So I go into businesses and help organisations to support their neurodivergent employees um, more effectively. So yeah, that's what I do. That's me.
Amazing. A lot of people who, like us, work with neurodiverse individuals, it usually comes from our own story and journey. So, what have you always done this, and what were you doing before? And if not, what kind of got you into this career path? That'd be really interesting to know.
Yeah, so I'll try not to make it take too long because my CV is quite varied,
Okay.
which now makes a lot of sense now I know that I've
Yeah.
got ADHD. So I've kind of gone through, I've worked in corporate finance, I then trained as a teacher and I worked in secondary school as a economics and business studies teacher. And then while I was working as a teacher and got pregnant with my twins, I sort of started a sideline business making cakes. Ended up turning that into a wedding cake business full time. Doing cakes at places like the Dorchester and Claridge's and some really big, yeah, like £1,000 plus cakes, which was really exciting, but quite exhausting to be quite honest.
Sure.
And then during COVID, I kind of diversified because obviously a lot of the weddings were cancelled. All the weddings were cancelled for a time. So I then went into mentoring other cake makers, kind of where I'd done teaching and set up my own business. I then helped other cake makers to develop their businesses. And so I did online courses and things like that. So that was up until about 5 years ago, and I was still making the cakes and doing the business mentoring, coaching all at the same time. And then around, say, 5 years ago, my one of my boys we realised was kind of really struggling, and what I saw was what I now know is emotional regulation, what we call it is emotional regulation. And we took him to a child psychologist and things, and she suggested an ADHD assessment. It wasn't something that I'd ever really thought about, like I'd heard of it, but it wasn't something that I had any knowledge of really. Um, and he went through the process and he was diagnosed. And while that was happening, I started putting the pieces together for myself. And I think it happens a lot, doesn't it, with certainly sort of like mums in their 30s and 40s and their kids get diagnosed and they go, oh, the psychologist said to me, it's often very genetic. And I was like, right, sort of looking at his dad, not even thinking about me. And then there's a difference between how it shows up in, how old is he, 8-year-old boys and 30, 40-year-old women. But I realized what it was. And then yeah, and realized what had been going on for me. So I mean, I'd previously been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And yeah, that's again so common. You get
Very
so many
common.
like
Yeah.
misdiagnoses.
Yeah.
It just didn't fit. I kind of knew like I felt anxious, but it didn't really. None of it made sense. That once I got
I can
that, and
relate. I
yeah,
literally just done a post on that yesterday
yeah,
about like it's anxiety, and you're like, is it? Is it
yeah,
though? Yeah, 100%
yeah.
feel that. Yeah.
And that was it. And once, I mean, I was very lucky. We had private medical insurance, so I was really lucky to be able to get an assessment really quickly. And once I then found out it was ADHD, that kind of made so much more sense. Because yeah, I did have like I was anxious a lot of the time because of a lot of what was going on with my ADHD, I think.
Yeah.
But it wasn't an anxiety disorder. And once I've started piecing together what's going on for me and learning how to work, with my brain or that kind of thing, actually a lot of that anxiety is really, really reduced. Um, so the way that then turned into me doing this for myself was I worked with an ADHD coach myself, and she was brilliant. She was so, it sounds really like cliched, but transformational. Really, really did change my life. And at that time when I was working with her, I just started doing my ICF like accreditation to be a like proper coach, not just a mentor, which is what I'd been doing to learn properly about coaching. And because it was so it was so helpful for me, it was that's what I want to do for other people. It sounds a bit cliche, doesn't it? But yeah, and that's where I got into it.
Amazing. So how long have you been doing it now then?
So about 3 years now.
Amazing.
So I did my ICF accreditation, then I went on and did further ADHD specific coach training because that was really important to me because I don't know if anyone can call themselves an ADHD coach with
Yep.
zero qualifications. I don't know how many people realize that. I think that's quite shocking, but for
It's
me,
yeah, I mean my industry is it's even worse because not only do
yeah,
people do that and call themselves ADHD or menopause or this coach, but even being like a fitness coach in itself, it's not like regulated. So,
no,
and that really worries me because it's people's health and fitness. It's a
exactly.
really important element, and literally anyone can just go, I've lost some weight, so now I'm going to be a coach. And it's like,
Yeah.
I've had open heart surgery. I can't really call myself a doctor, So it's quite scary, isn't it, for sure?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So that was really important to me. So yeah, I went and
Amazing.
did all of that, and now yeah, I've been doing that for a few years now.
Amazing. And I'm kind of then just curious because you've niched into, obviously, you are an ADHD coach, but you've kind of sub-niched a little bit into specializing with sort of the high achieving, and we were chatting about before we press record. It's not a niche, but generally you magnetize sort of the late diagnosed women, which makes sense with the things that you talk about, which is the sort of high achieving women, because there's a lot of overlap, isn't there, with like very sort of driven, high achieving women and sort of the neurodiversity sort of side of things because of the perfection, because of the traits, really, right? And then obviously
Yeah.
then you've looked at the traits of like the perfectionism, the overwhelm, and all those things. So what made you kind of go down that angle? Because you kind of, you've worked with a coach and you've gone, I really want to help other ADHDers, but was it kind of like I want to help people who are in my boat, who've had the experiences that I've had, or was there something else that made you kind of want to work with this demographic of people specifically?
Um, yeah, mostly I think it was that just this is my experience, and I think it's really important. Sort of as you're saying, just because you've been in that experience, you can't necessarily coach other people, so you do need the proper training for it. But it is something that I've realized. Looking back, I realized that I struggled with ADHD, but I'm quite fortunate with the support that I've had in place and that kind of thing. I haven't desperately, I haven't been fired from jobs and things like that. I've tended to do really well, even like with the cake making. But everyone was really surprised when I decided to close that down because they're like, what's happened? Are you not getting orders anymore?" And I'm like, "No, I'm getting more than I can deal with. Actually, I'm just done. I'm done with it. Like I've taken it to where I want to take it to, and it's done." But I sort of see that in a lot of the women particularly, but also men that I work with, especially when they're late diagnosed. It's that kind of always striving for the next thing and always striving for the next thing and not really kind of fully celebrating what they have achieved. And I just see that so much, stress and overwhelm that's happening in their lives, and they're either not reaching their potential because they're struggling with all of that, or they are, but it's costing them a
Mm.
lot, a
And
lot,
what
and
are sort
that's
of the costs of these things? Because I don't think we speak about this enough. Like a lot of content I see online around sort of like neurodiversity is explaining the struggles and sort of validating them, which I think to an extent is good. I think too much of it can kind of keep people in sort of trapped mode. But I think it's really good that we say, oh, well, this is why you feel this way. But I don't think people actually speak enough about like the long-term impacts of, well, actually, if you don't get some support with this or you don't figure this thing out, it is going to have a negative impact on your life. So when you're saying the cost, kind of what kind of things have you seen from experience or from your knowledge that it can have an impact on people?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good point. It's something that I talk about a lot, actually. So what you'll see on the outside is not what is happening kind of underneath. So you'll see these really successful, running successful businesses or doing really, really well at work, getting the promotions and everything else. But underneath, they're kind of maybe having issues with their relationships because they're struggling to kind of keep up with that because they're putting all of their effort into work. Often, and I imagine you see this a lot, their health and their well-being is affected because, all of that hidden effort that people are not seeing that they're putting into their work and their day jobs, when they get home they just don't have the energy anymore, or the decision fatigue is set in, and they miss their gym class, they eat a bowl of cereal for dinner instead of actually cooking something nutritious, and all they're often, like, people with ADHD really struggle to rest and to recover. They're often don't think that they deserve it, and they keep going with it. So they don't get all of that. So their health, well-being, their sleep is often really affected. So yeah, there's huge impacts on their own mental and physical health, their relationships, the emotional load that they're always carrying. So we talked about the anxiety thing. And so I think that anxiety is often underlying because they're kind of trying to juggle all the balls and worried that they're going to be dropping something at some point. Self-criticism. I mean, yeah, I'll keep going on it, but that there's so much under the surface that people just don't see. And that's a lot of the work that I do with organisations. Actually, is I go in and talk and try and kind of some awareness for the
Yeah.
people leaders to see what they're dealing with underneath.
100%. And obviously, like with myself, I tend to get the people coming with those problems. And generally, when I kind of like unpack it and look at like, well, why are we struggling? Yes, there'll be things that are very specific to the health and fitness world of like diet culture and over restriction. But I do have a lot of very ambitious, amazing women, and there is that they're putting so much into other things that they just put that last, and then they're like, but why
Yeah.
can't I do it, sort of thing. So this is why I really want to dive into some of the strategies now, because like we are saying there, it's really good to validate these things, but ultimately we want to solve the problems, and that's what today's about, is giving people some value on how they can solve these things. And if you guys want to apply that to your health and fitness, amazing. But if maybe that's an area that you're doing well in and something else is crumbling, it's relationships or it's
Mm.
career or whatever, we can apply that to that. So kind of chunking the sort of three main things that you support people with, which is sort of the overwhelm, the perfectionism, all or nothing, and the decision fatigue. It'd be quite good to kind of explore maybe sort of like why we see these things happen. And then also, I know there's not just one magic tool or one magic strategy, but maybe some of the best, most effective things that we could apply to it. So if we start with overwhelm, which is
Yeah.
a word, if I had like a pound for every time I heard that from like clients, I won't need to work ever again. And I'm sure you
Yeah.
can probably relate to that
Yeah.
as well. But why is it that a neurodivergent brain gets so overwhelmed? And is overwhelm actually the right word, or is it something else that we kind of label as overwhelm?
Yeah, some really good points there. Um, to start with, I think a lot of, and I mean, and I say I specialize with late diagnosed people. I think neurodivergent people spend their lives overcompensating, and trying to hide it as well because they don't want to be seen to be different, and they don't want to be seen to be, less than or not capable and that kind of thing. So they're constantly going through life managing this huge internal pressure that's sort of building up inside of them. Um, and you know, to simplify it in a sense, our brains work differently to what's considered normal. So we're constantly trying to adapt and trying to fit in and do things in the way that is expected of everybody else. So we'll rely, I say we, I'm talking about people like me with ADHD, and I am generalizing here. It's obviously it's different for everybody. I just want to make that really clear. Not everyone will have this exact experience, but what I see in my clients and for me is that because of the way that our brains work, we tend to kind of rely on coping strategies that are maybe not necessarily healthy, and maybe we don't even realize we're doing it actually. But things like relying on that urgency and that last minute pressure, And that's needed in ADHD brains particularly because we need that adrenaline to activate the dopamine pathways to actually get stuff done. And so when we're always operating at that like last minute stress level, it feels like it works because usually we get it done, but then it comes with that cost of the things that we were just talking about. It's expensive in terms of your energy and your well-being. So they're dealing with sort of operating in a different way. It tends to be a lot of, like I said, that overcompensating. So working kind of longer hours to try and prove, if they feel like they've not been particularly productive, they'll work really late. And they're not realizing that actually something that I think is really important, if anyone does identify with this, that I talk about a lot of my clients is you think that you're not being productive. Some days you think that I'm only operating at 50% capacity. So like that's lazy or that's not good enough. But actually, most days you're probably operating at like 150% of what the average person is. And we don't recognize that and see what we're doing there. And so we think that even if we're operating at 100%, that feels like we're failing because we're not doing what we did yesterday, but that's not sustainable. So that's always kind of going on. So I think that's what kind of adds to the overwhelm of all of those things that are happening behind the scenes, as well as perfectionism that we've mentioned and people pleasing, and all of that kind of thing. Um, and and I think when you have ADHD, overwhelm can come from that sheer mental load of managing everyday life, which I always find difficult because I don't want it to sound like if you've got ADHD, you can't cope with life. But there's so many additional pressures on you as someone who's neurodivergent, whether it's sensory things or um, managing like um, expectations, social expectations, things like that, all of the things that are different,
Mhm.
we're kind of trying to manage all the time. And so when we're just managing everyday life, and especially when you add in like I mentioned, most people that are neurodivergent probably, if you've got kids, they're quite likely to be neurodivergent themselves. If you've got other responsibilities, it just becomes, so much, it's not the overwhelm often doesn't come from those really huge tasks because I mean, I don't know about you, but people that I know with ADHD, they're the ones you want beside you when there's a crisis, like when it's a big thing. But it's the small things. It's just remembering appointments and, making decisions, planning meals, all of those things over and over again just takes up so much mental energy, that it just leaves us feeling completely overwhelmed.
Yeah, I
So,
yeah, see that a lot with people. I also see it with sort of my clients with it's sort of the executive function of prioritization where everything feels important and everything
yeah,
feels urgent, but you can't do everything. Whereas obviously not like, right, well, that's my priority today, where it's like, I haven't done this, I haven't done that. And so like you feel like your brain's been pulled in like 20 directions all the time. So I definitely think there'll be a lot of people, nodding their heads to that, like, yep, can resonate to that. So we know that that's the problem. We understand why it happens. So what are some things that people can do about it, right? Because people will be literally listening to this, and I've worked through it, but I know me 5, 10 years ago would have been like, yes, that is exactly like how I feel. So what can we do to manage overwhelm? Because it's not productive. And when you were saying that the cost of it, there's a lot of psychological cost that isn't there of like
mm,
the self-worth piece of feeling just exhausted, feeling that you're
yeah,
incapable, which if you're a high achiever, you've got that is it cognitive dissonance, the word that I'm thinking of there, where you're not who you think you are. And God, it's so much that eats away at you, right? So
yeah.
what can people do about it? What are some sort of like strategies and tips or mindset shifts that people can take to start to sort of work through that overwhelm?
So yeah, I mean, I didn't answer the question, but I think this comes in here when you said about like whether it actually is overwhelm, is that the right term? I think that's a really good place to start, actually, is, what's causing the overwhelm? Because on the surface, and I think that's it. I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed, and it's almost hard to picture what is that overwhelm, what's causing it. And then it's about digging deeper. So you might think, okay, well, I'm overwhelmed because I've got too much work on. Like at work, they're expecting me to do too much. There's so much to do and I can't get through it all, so I'm overwhelmed. Right, okay. So let's dig a little bit deeper on that. What's actually, making that so hard? Is it because the expectations aren't very clear? Is it because you're being like a perfectionist or, there's people pleasing things going on here? Is it the emotional load or the sensory overwhelm or things like that? What are the things that are making up that make it so difficult? And so then rather than trying to tackle overwhelm, because like, say it's a massive big thing, how do I stop being overwhelmed? It's like, let's break it down. And what is the thing that maybe I need to look at individually for me? So that's sort of like the starting point. Um, and I think too many people think like, why is this so hard for me? Why can't I do it? And we beat ourselves up. And actually the question needs to be, what's making this harder?
Mm,
And what can I do to reduce those barriers a little bit? So that's the big thing, and that's not something, again, it's not like a quick tip. It's not
no.
something that you can just sort of suddenly, oh right, okay, I'll do that. I mean, I don't really believe in hacks for ADHD, to be honest. And yeah, it's the same in your industry as well, isn't it? It's like you can't just suddenly, get fit or whatever. It's making small progress and thinking about things.
Yeah.
um but yeah, that's where I'd start with overwhelm.
I like
um
that. And it's kind of like thinking, well, if that's, you can't actually solve overwhelm, so what actually is driving it? And if you can,
yeah.
it's the same with like, if I look at, oh, I'm overeating in my industry, well, that's the problem, but what's causing it? Because
Yeah.
you can't fix overeating in itself, but you can fix or deal with the reason why. So if it's over restriction, if it's poor food environment, if it's
Mm.
dopamine seeking, whatever it is, and obviously it's the same there for you, like, right, what's driving that? And then going into each thing as like an individual entity. That's
Yeah.
that's brilliant. And I think even that in itself, some people are gonna be like, oh, actually, that's what I need to do, rather than just telling myself, oh, I'm overwhelmed, I feel overwhelmed. It's like, well, okay, but why? What's
Yeah.
driving it? And
Yeah.
then go and work on that thing rather than just sitting in overwhelm, because there's nothing you can do about overwhelm in itself. It's what's driving it.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes that does, involve maybe working with a coach. And I don't mean to sort of just be selling that, but, or someone that that cares about you, because sometimes you need to kind of verbally process it and go through it, because when it's running around in your head, I'm overwhelmed, then it's hard to know how to kind of get to the bottom of it. Whereas if you've got someone you say like, oh, I want to talk this through, or if not, maybe journaling or something like that, but actually, you know, externalizing that thing that's running around in your head and trying to pick it apart.
Yes,
Um,
I like
yeah,
that. I love that. So moving into the next thing that you're really sort of a specialist in, which is the perfectionism. And I think that word again is another one that if I had a pound for every time that someone said that in my world, definitely want me to be working. And with the people that I work with, it's huge. It's a big one, and it's very much that if I can't do it 100%, if I haven't ticked every single box that has been set out for me, I've ruined it. And this is where we see a lot of big pendulum swings in sort of the fitness side of things, of
hmm
going all in, overeating because they go out for a meal, or we're human beings, we're overeating, especially if we're on a journey and we're trying to learn to work through that, and then I've ruined it. I was even having a conversation with a client yesterday about the power of a morning walk, and she was like, well, some days I don't have the time for half an hour. I'm like, who says it has to be half an hour?
yeah,
It's like, but if
yeah,
it's not half an hour, it's not worth doing. I'm like, says who? So it's breaking down these barriers. So again, let's kind of, do the same sort of structure of perfectionism, neurodivergence. Why is perfectionism such a common trait, personality thing? And again, is it actually perfectionism? Is it something else? And again, if we look at sort of the implications of, there's pros, I do think there's a lot of pros to perfectionism, because it means you're driven, it means you want
yeah,
to do things really well, which is amazing,
hmm
but also it comes with a lot of costs as well. So let's
yeah.
explore perfectionism.
Yeah, yeah. So again, I think, it's a coping strategy often. It's a way of managing of managing, yeah, the neurodivergence or the struggles that you've got in your life. And again, I don't mean to I think this comes up with people who've been diagnosed earlier, but also I think it's really something that when you're not aware of your neurodivergence until later in life, you don't realize what you've kind of been going through. You can't spot those patterns so easily. And you go off on a bit of a tangent here, but just that's what I like hope for, like my kids now being, having been diagnosed as children, they're kind of aware of what's happening, and they can do things differently. Whereas now, once I found out age 41, there's a lot of unlearning to do.
Absolutely.
And so, you spend years of your life, many, many years, being told that, different things that you're being, you're too much or not enough, or you're inconsistent, or you're careless, or always got, that you have so much potential, said with a, dot 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 kind of thing, and you're not quite reaching it. So you get those kind of external messages, what then become internalized, and it becomes this whole thing that you're really, these messaging that you try and protect yourself against by getting everything right. Because you think if I get everything perfect, then, I'm not being careless, or I'm not being, rubbish. I always thought, and I still do sometimes and working on it, but that I'm just a rubbish adult, you know. But actually that comes from all of that kind of messaging. Whereas if you work really hard to get it right, then you don't have to worry about feeling that kind of that criticism or the rejection or blame or all of those kind of emotional responses. So yeah, so I think it's often not necessarily, I don't, it might be, but necessarily because of your neurotype as such, but because of the way that you've experienced the world.
Yes, I 100% agree. It's the experiences that shape that sort of thought process.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I did
kind of
also,
on
sorry.
topic, but not like, do you think that labeling yourself as a perfectionist is harmful? Because something that I work on a lot with my clients is when they say things like, oh, I can't because I'm a perfectionist. I do a lot of work, and this might be one of the strategies to unwrite it to be like, well, I'm I have more perfectionist tendencies, or I'm a high achiever. I like to do things right. Because when we self-label as I am a perfectionist,
Hmm.
which I think as well can be quite a comforting coping thinking of like, oh, I just
Yeah,
work
yeah,
really
yeah.
hard, and if I can't, it's not my fault that I fall off track when things aren't perfect. Because when you say that you are something, your brain is always seeking for evidence, right? That
Hmm.
confirms what it believes to be true. So if you've internalized all this and then you fundamentally believe that you are, well, of course, when one thing doesn't go to plan, I'm a rubbish adult. When
Mm.
your kid kicks off and you don't know how to deal with it, I'm a rubbish adult. When you overeat, I can't diet, I can't do fat loss. I just thought that'd be quite an interesting sort of thought process of like, is that something you explore with your clients as well to try and remove that self-labeling of this is who I am versus this is something I experience.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think um it becomes an identity thing, doesn't it? It's sort of something that you see, exactly, you see yourself as, and as you say, I mean, your brain likes things to be the same. It likes things to stay where it is. So I'm a perfectionist. I'll always be a perfectionist. It's much harder, and it's easier to kind of to I don't want to say easier, like that's necessarily a conscious choice that people are making, but kind of opt out of any other options. This is the way I'm going to be. And again, I think that sort of comes that whole identity comes back to how you've experienced life. So if you've always been praised, you get a lot of I know you get a lot of like things can go different ways with ADHD. Sometimes it's very hard to get a job, or there's a lot of the prison population with ADHD and things like that. But also a lot of the really high achievers, the good girls at school, those people, they're the ones that have been praised all their life for being capable, being, she's so clever, she's so intelligent, she's such a good girl. Oh boy, but all of those things. And then again, coming back to what you said about your brain, like it feels unsafe to not be that person. So if you do something imperfectly, if you try and allow yourself to do it, that's, whoa, no, I can't do that. Um, so yeah, so definitely that definitely comes up. And I think as you said, like what I do with my clients sometimes is working through that like self-worth thing, not being tied to your output.
Mm.
Yeah, who you are and what you're worth as a person is more than what you produce.
I have like my own sort of unique strategies in the health and fitness space for overcoming perfectionism. But is there anything else besides from like the identity and self-worth piece that you do to help people go, actually, it's okay to step away from this, and actually it's probably really helpful to let go of this like needing everything to be 100%, which one of my favorite questions to ask clients is, oh, what's 100% anyway? And no one can
Yeah,
ever answer me because it's kind of this like abstract concept that we have in our heads,
yeah,
isn't it, of like perfect being a thing, which
yeah,
for most of the things in life, there is like, okay, if you do an exam and it's a score out of 100, you could argue there is a perfect there, but like, what is a perfect parent? What is a
yeah,
perfect adult? What is a perfect partner? Like,
yeah.
you can't actually define it anyway. So it's almost like an illusion that doesn't exist that keeps us trapped.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point, actually, isn't it? It's like, what is it that you're striving for? Because, yeah, it's very abstract. In terms of like how to to manage that. I think you kind of covered it in some of the things that I do, very similar to what you said about that, like going for the walk thing. So I would say, like, the big question to ask is what's good enough,
Mhm.
and practice doing good enough. So again, like, we're not looking to kind of do a complete 180 and suddenly not be a perfectionist at all and not care about anything that we do. It's all about making small steps, things that we can kind of sustain as well. So starting off with the least scary thing that you can do that's not perfect. So is it that, maybe I didn't put makeup on for that Zoom meeting? Or is it that, that report, I only checked it 3 times instead of 10 times? What can we do to just kind of lower the bar a little bit without, lowering expectation, without it kind of the output being necessarily much worse, but actually, is this good enough? What does good enough mean? So yeah, what's 100%, but also what's good enough, and then build like minimum versions. So one of the things I think with ADHD is energy really fluctuates. So like you said, I haven't got time for the half an hour walk. Well, if I wake up and I haven't had a very good night's sleep and I've had a lot else going on, I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk. So build these kind of minimum habits in that you can't fail at, kind of thing. Because if you set your expectations really high all the time, then you're setting yourself up to fail. And then that goes into that whole cycle, doesn't it, of self-criticism, of I'm not good enough, I can't do it. And then when you're feeling low like that, actually your brain's taken up with all of those thoughts and it can't operate at its, 100% or whatever capacity anyway.
Absolutely. And
So yeah.
at first that can feel really hard for ADHDers, right? Because if we are so
Hmm.
driven for these big things, it's like, well, I can't just do 10 minutes, so I can't just do
Hmm.
that. But over time, once you've trusted that process and you actually start to see it's a much calmer place of energy, but also you do still get good output and good results. That's how you kind of buy into it. But it is really hard at first, isn't it, to get people to buy into it because if it isn't perfect, it's not worth doing is so ingrained
Yeah.
that actually just doing something a little bit less is like, but
Yeah.
that's not okay. That's not good enough. So do you have any sort of like systems or strategies or mindset shifts that you do to help people lean into that in your world? Because if they're coming to you like it has to be perfect, and you're saying, we'll just do 10 minutes, and then that resistance comes up. How do you help people overcome that resistance at first?
So I think it's really personal, isn't it? It's like for everyone, it's going to be different. So it's about finding the thing that you can cope with, finding what your kind of boundaries are of where you can step out. So for some people some people don't find that quite as hard as others, and we can maybe push it a bit harder with them. But some people that is feels almost impossible. It's really taking the very first, smallest, tiniest step. What can we do differently? And practice it and just prove to your brain that actually, nothing did go wrong there. So yeah, I think that's really it, is just finding tiny, tiny little things and documenting it some way, and with coaching, often that's like next time you come to the coaching session, we'll talk about it and we'll kind of assess and evaluate what happened there. If you're not working with a coach, it's, perhaps it's journaling or some kind of visual thing of what I did, and celebrating it like in a non-cheesy way, but just actually recognizing what you're doing and reminding your brain that it's okay, but in the tiniest possible way each time, and to again, it's really hard with, like you say, the all or nothing thinking. But we want those results immediately. We want to kind of work on it, and then we're suddenly really good at it, and just kind of, acknowledge that you're not going to get there instantly.
Mm.
Um,
And I don't
yeah.
know what your thoughts on this as well, but with things like this, where you're developing strategies for, I like to think of a lot of these things as like management and coping strategies, whereas I think sometimes people have the expectation that they're fixes, but
Hmm.
you can have all these systems and tools in play, but you're still going to find things challenging. And I think it's not to kind of be negative, like, oh, you're always going to struggle with it, but actually just to kind of give people that awareness that, it's about managing it more efficiently so you can live a better life.
Yeah.
Actually, it's still normal to have those thoughts and feelings and you know, feel that way, but it's what do you do about it? Because I think that was something that I struggled with at first. I thought, oh, well, if I learn how to manage my ADHD, I'm never going to
Mm.
have these perfectionist thoughts or these all or nothing swings or these, the
Yeah.
RSD or anything like that. But actually, oh no, it's still there, but it's maybe in the past, RSD would be a client would cancel, their coaching, and I would be in a spiral for days, wondering what I did wrong, thinking my business was going to fail. Whereas now I have a sad because I'm going to miss the client, and then I'm going to carry on with my day. So it's
Yeah.
that's that thought that that sting is still there, but it's the
Yeah.
intensity of it. And I kind of wonder what your thoughts were on that as well. And like, do you ever talk about that, like, expectation management with clients as well? Because I think, we always want everything fixed, don't we? We don't want
Hmm.
problems or challenges, but actually, I personally don't think we can not have challenges. It's just not this big of a challenge. It's now this big, which makes it so much easier to manage.
Yeah, I agree with literally everything you just said there, exactly that. And yeah, I mean, sometimes that's it. Some people do come to you for coaching, and it's like, what do you want to get out of coaching? It's basically, I want to be neurotypical. So right, okay, that's not
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah, ask Harry
But,
Potter for that one. That's not for me.
I mean, they don't say that specifically, but what they're saying is, I want to be better. I want to not procrastinate. I want to not, and all of these things. And it's like, well, okay, what we're looking at is just kind of maybe like you say, you're at 10 for perfectionism. Like, let's get you down to like 8 or 7, just to give you that little bit of a gap to make life that little bit easier. And then when you're a little bit less of a perfectionist, maybe that makes the overwhelm a little bit less as well. So you're kind of creating these small gaps all over, which overall it's like, I suppose, like inches that you lose off of your body, isn't it? It's like you lose
It
it there,
adds up
it
over
all adds
time.
up.
Like
Yeah.
you only lose a pound on the scales. Like, yeah, but over time, every single pound in 6 months, that's transformative. And I think it is that those little things, it's like, okay, it's a little bit better, but actually over time, if you look back in 6 months or 12 months, you're like, oh my God, like if I think back to the person I was when I was diagnosed with ADHD, which was 2023. So it's been about
Mm.
God, I don't tell my time. It's going about 3.5 years. It feels like it's shorter than that, but also that's right, I think.
Yeah,
Three
there's
and a
about
half,
three. Yeah.
was it 2024 that I got diagnosed? Anyway, point being, it's been 2.5 or 3.5 years. It's been years. And I look back at that time and I've not had any like coaching or therapy or anything that I've done that's had like a transformative difference, but all just the little things that I've changed and
Yeah.
implemented. I now look back at the person I was and think, oh my God, like I am so much more functional. I'm so much more happy. I'm so much more mentally healthy. I feel like I'm not getting through life as much, like in the struggle bus. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm living and some, I'm not surviving, I'm thriving a lot more. And it's really hard to, neurodivergent brains especially want everything yesterday. But actually, if you can really instill that into people and use analogies. So one thing an analogy I use is the blade of grass. I don't know if you've heard that. Like if you
Mm.
look at a blade of grass every day, it looks no
Mm.
different. But
Hmm.
if you went away for 6 months and came back, it's grown so much. And if
Yeah.
you think about every session and everything that we do like that, like you're not going to see changes necessarily. But if you
Yeah.
look back at I get my clients to look back at their onboarding form. I look back at your check-in from like 10 weeks ago. And it's like,
Mm.
wow,
Mm.
actually, I
Mm.
have come so far. And I'm guessing it's very similar with your clients as well.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, we do exactly the same. Sort of like go do sort of midway reviews and look back at actually where you are with that. But I love that for you. I love it's just proof, isn't it, that you don't have to be living in this constant sense of like I'm just getting by. And I know again, there's so many sort of like cliches that come up, but that kind of you can thrive. You don't have to just survive.
It's like one of the words
It's
I use a lot because I fundamentally do
yeah,
believe it. And that's why
yeah,
we do the work we do, right? Because
yeah,
it's not just, oh, I have ADHD, I'm passionate about ADHD, I'll make some money. It's
yeah,
actually we've learned how to work with it in a way that has, again, cliche as hell, but transformed our lives. And we want to gift that back to people.
yeah.
You've got to be in the right mindset. So speaking of that, there's one thing I do want to chat about more because this is a really freaking common one. I know it's something you would help people with, which is the decision fatigue. I used to think before I was diagnosed and knew that this was a thing with ADHD that I was just a terrible decision maker.
Hmm.
Where do you want to go? What do you want for tea? This t-shirt or that t-shirt in the shop. I just thought I couldn't make decisions. I now understand it's the executive dysfunction. That's why deciding what I wanted for tea or if I wanted the pink or the yellow pajamas genuinely felt like being on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and you've got the question and you can't get it wrong. It's like, ah.
Yeah. Mm.
So again, the question is decision fatigue. Why is it such a thing with neurodivergent brains? Both on like, we get it on the small scale. Do you want this or this for your tea or this in the restaurant? But obviously then big life decisions as well. Like, do I quit my job? Do I go to this? Why is it so hard for neurodivergent brains? Like, why is making decisions so freaking hard?
So, I mean, you've mentioned executive dysfunction, and just for anyone who doesn't sort of know what that is, that's basically like the management of your brain. It's it being able to plan things, organize things, prioritize things, your working memory. That's the one that I always forget, funny enough. Getting started on tasks, completing tasks, all of that stuff that, your brain operation system is what is kind of wired a little bit differently in neurodivergent brains. And so those systems don't operate quite as consistently, maybe, or as effectively. And I don't want to say like they're broken, but it works in a different way. So we can struggle with all of those different things. So that means like making decisions take up a lot more effort because we're trying to access all of those parts of our brain that maybe those pathways are not quite as straightforward as they are for other people. So we struggle with putting all of those different pieces together, because a decision isn't just that, what do I wear or what am I going to have for dinner? It's not a single thing in itself, is it? There's so much more attached to it. And I think sometimes that's worth reminding yourself and being aware of, like, not blaming yourself, oh, it's just one single silly decision. There's so much more in it, like what are all the different options, what matters most, like you said, prioritizing is hard. So what is the most important thing here, and what order do I do things in? If I, there's something that's got to come before that. If I want to make that decision, what's the thing that happens before it? So there's all of this stuff that's going around in an already very busy brain, and then there's emotions involved as well. So that and emotional dysregulation is something that often is difficult with ADHD brains. So that, and I think you sort of mentioned it with RSD as well, the intensity of those feelings is just so great, so much greater. So when you're thinking about, like, what if I make the wrong decision? What if I choose wrong? Or like, what will other people think? All of that is kind of at play so much more. And this is a normal human experience. As you said, a lot of these traits happen for everybody, but for those of us that are ADHD or neurodivergent, often that is just so much more intense and so much more frequent. So we're putting all that pressure on ourselves to make that right decision. So even those small decisions feel really loaded.
I think it is the smaller decisions that feel loaded that obviously
Mm,
then has a negative consequence. Because I think it's, if you're making a very big life decision, like, do I accept this job? Is it going to change? I think that's completely normal for to earn anyone,
yeah, yeah.
100%. But like when it is something so true, like even I had it, then I was like, oh, but an hour ago I had a client call. I was like, oh, do I have a coffee beforehand? Do I need one? And I
Mm,
did sit there for about 5 minutes, and I was like, whereas, so that's 5 minutes of mental energy wasted deciding if I want a coffee, which is, if I had a
yeah,
coffee or not, nothing,
yeah.
there's not going
Well,
to be any big impact of that. But
no.
it is that, isn't it, over time? And sort of thinking of that, the consequence, because that's why we work through the problems. If someone is having like a lot of decision fatigue, what can be some of like the negative consequences of that on their well-being, on, you know, everything really?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, and I think it's similar to the things with overwhelm and all of that, isn't it? It's when you're giving all of that energy to making all those decisions and you're putting all that pressure on yourself and you're being probably quite kind of unkind to yourself about being rubbish at making decisions and all of that, or worrying, making the wrong decision, then you're taking away energy that could be spent on, work, relationships, fitness, all of those other things. Um, and I think it's really helpful to kind of understand that it's, again, we've spoken about this on this conversation. It's not something that, oh, you're just rubbish at because you've got ADHD, so there's nothing you can do about it. But actually your brain is wired a bit differently, and so you've got more to, more to work with here. It's harder. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but it is harder. Um I think, I don't want to go too deep into it, but it was helpful for me to understand this concept. We've got this default mode network that happens in your brain. You've got these two networks. There's the task positive and the default mode networks. And in neurotypical brains, they're kind of switched on or off. It's like you have one or the other. And the task positive network is when you're doing things and you're just getting stuff done. The default mode is the sort of thinking and ruminating and working things out. And so in neurotypical brains, you're kind of either doing the thinking and working things out, or you're doing it. So you switch off that one and you do that one. Whereas what they've seen in like brain scans for neurodivergent people is actually that default mode network is always on.
Mhm.
So even when you're doing the thing, that rumination and that overthinking is still going in the background, and that's really inefficient because actually you can't just do the thing because you're questioning it, and you're going over it all in your mind all at the same time. So that's like, that is part of neurochemistry that's what's going on for you there. So it is harder for us to do it. So I think again, like the very first sort of big step, which isn't necessarily a hack here, but is just to be a bit kinder to yourself about it, that this is harder and you are doing a really good job, and don't kind of make it worse by getting, cross with yourself.
For sure. So again, just to kind of like we've done with the others, to look at some sort of like systems and strategies because it is a big one, and I think everyone with a neurodivergent brain can really go, yep, struggle with that. And like obviously we've just said there, it's not about just deciding what you want for tea has been a bit hard. Actually, there are negative consequences of not managing it well. So what are some things that you can do to help people who are really struggling with this?
So I think like being aware of the fact that you struggle with it, and then and not just kind of pretending that, not pretending, but not forgetting that you do. And so like making those decisions at a time when you've got a bit more capacity. So if you're getting up for a 6 a.m. workout and you're trying to decide, am I going to do a class, or am I going to just go to the gym? What am I going to wear? All of those things. Make all those decisions the night before. Lay your kit out, like book the class or whatever, so that when you get up, it's just do. It's not, there's no thinking. So, I mean, depending on when you think best, you might not have the energy late at night. Perhaps that's the morning before for the next day or whatever. But in advance, at some point, try and get those kind of decisions made, because you're going to have more capacity when you've got that moment than in the moment of making the decision. And then I think some other things are things like creating like default options.
Yes.
So not perfect plans, but this like, okay, if I really can't decide, I'll just do this because that's better than nothing.
I call them if then options. Like if I feel X, then just
Yep.
do Y. Like if you can't be bothered to cook any dinner, then just have, yeah, love that.
Yeah, that's my thing. Yeah. So yeah, like a menu almost of ideas, not too many, because again, you don't want too many
Yeah,
decisions to take from, but yeah, reduce the number of decisions as well. Like I have like 3 breakfasts and I don't really eat anything else. I just have
yeah.
those 3 things.
That's a huge thing I tell people to do is most of my industry's like, oh, that diversity. I'm like,
Yeah.
have the same stuff because one week we
Yeah.
hyperfixate and love it anyway, and it just removes the decision. And you can have what I get a lot of my clients to do is to create the novelty through the same. So give me an example of one of your like 3 breakfasts that you love.
So like yogurt and fruit.
So you could do that. So you could say, well, maybe you change the fruit.
Mm,
Maybe you change the yogurt. Maybe you one week you add a little something. So if you've ever
yeah,
done this, but just adding a few little Rice
that's
Krispies
it.
gives it a bit of crunch for that
Yeah.
sensory joy. You could add that one day, add a few little chocolate chips one day, or some dark chocolate or something, drizzle of peanut butter. So like I always say like same but change it. So if one of your
Yeah.
staple lunches is like scrambled egg on toast, amazing. Well, let's change the different breads. We have a bagel one week and have crumpets one week. Then maybe let's add a different sauce. We've had a bit of cottage cheese one time. So
Mm,
again, it's remove the decisions, but you can because I think
yeah.
that's one thing people think is like, oh, but if I just do the same things and have those default options, it gets boring for me. I don't like that structure and the
That's
rebellion can
really,
come in. But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I found that's quite a good way around it. But yeah, I like the default options as many as you can is a really
Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you're exactly right. And I think then, and also kind of remembering that if you can get the basics sorted, like you say, like what's the main part of the meal, and keep, say, consistent. And that's another thing to discuss, I think, about what consistency means. But that gives you kind of, like you say, like a base to work from, and then you can always add and change little things once you've got that settled. But don't try and, yeah, exactly, have all different things every day, because it's just not sustainable, is it? You've got to do things that are sustainable for your
Yeah,
brain and
100%.
your life.
100%. Well, that has been fantastic. I've taken so much from that myself, and I know the listeners will have done as well. And like, obviously, we've tried to apply it a little bit to sort of the health and fitness world, but those sort of strategies and what is great is it's applicable to whatever you're. And the thing is, as well, I always think everything is health and fitness, right? Because
Mm.
if you're struggling in your career or relationships, that is usually going to have a domino effect on health and fitness, whether it's mentally, physically, food decisions, sleep, stress. So it is going to enhance your life applying these. But obviously, we've only been able to kind of go surface level with these things. We could, go in deep with these strategies and problems. So if people have enjoyed this and taken a lot and would like to learn more from like your social media, where can people find you? What sort of resources do you have? I'll link all of them in the description as well, but just so you can share that as well.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, thanks. So I've got a website, laurensmy.co.uk, and I'm on Instagram, Lauren Smy ADHD coach. And yeah, I've got some resources on my website. If you go onto there, there's some free stuff and some sort of really low cost where I've done, webinars and workbooks and things like that. So I've got a couple on Overwhelm and Perfectionism. I don't think I've got one on decision. I'll have to create something for decision making now. But yeah, lots of bits and pieces on there, so you can find me there.
Amazing. I'll make sure that all those are linked. And just to wrap up, saying a big thank you for your time because it's been valuable for me and I know it'll be valuable for everyone else as well. And for everyone who is a regular listener, I will catch you on our next episode.
Thanks so much for having me, Lucy.